And this is the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. We are looking ahead to the NFL draft. We are turning the page on the 2023 NFL season. We'll talk a little bit about Super Bowl 58, any lingering takeaways there. And as I remember how to speak English, we will start the show. All right, welcome on in. We're refreshed here. This is the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm John McKechnie. That is Mario Puig. Sorry for the clunky intro, to say the least. But Mario, glad to have you back on. We've made it to the other side. The 2023 NFL season officially in the books. Your Kansas City Chiefs are once again Super Bowl champions. That's 3 out of 5 years that the Chiefs have taken it down. It was I would stop short of saying it was an exciting game overall or like a total instant classic, but the last 22 minutes or so,
it had a plot twist. Yeah,
it was there. It was there. So it was a slow burn, then it got good.
Yeah, so good competitive outcome to have such a close ending to the game that's supposed to identify the best team in the league. It seems to have worked. The process seems to have worked as far as that goes. And yeah, the overtime ending was part of an not unusually entertaining for a Super Bowl, but like you said, it was a clutch last second addition to the case to make it like one of the more solid recent ones. Obviously if you're a 49ers fan, you might not feel that way.
Yeah, that's tough if you're the Niners, but I think if you are a Niners fan, you have to, if you're looking at this with a thread or a note of honesty, you left a lot of meat on the bone. Like there were just a lot of self-imposed mistakes. Like it felt like the Niners were moving the ball almost at will, especially in the first half, and just didn't have a ton of points to show for it. That's a problem when you're playing against the Chiefs. You want to get as many points as humanly possible to make Patrick Mahomes catch up, because he's probably going to one way or the other. But you make those mistakes. I think there was a ton of hand wringing about the decision to receive the ball in overtime, and all the discussion about, whoa, I didn't know what the overtime rules for the playoffs were for the Super Bowl were until I looked up at the Jumbotron. You heard that from Eric Armstead. I mean, it was,
yeah, that's how I felt too. But I was like, I'm glad I'm not a player or a coach in the NFL right now. But yeah, in the game. But yeah, it's been really funny to watch. Not that many people, to be fair, but there've been a couple people in media who have kind of like strained, turning their heads sideways and squinting really hard to see a way that was like, maybe Kyle Shanahan can be justified with this. Like maybe there's some way this could be rationalized. Or there's even one of my particular favorites who was like, actually, it was pretty much the right thing to do. It was actually a good idea. It's like these are all crazy people ideas. This is really easy to understand. Like you want to take the ball second because like what the terms of the outcome are at that point. Like the justification is like, it's kind of the same either way if you think about it. No, it's not. That's has something to do with why it turned out the way it did. Is that it is not pretty much the same as it turns out.
And maybe it's truthful, maybe it's not. But the Chiefs have all basically said, yeah, if the Niners scored a touchdown on that first drive, they were going to go for 2 and end the game that way. So.
Did you see the clips too of the when I think it might have been Andy Reid, Kelsey, and Mahomes had microphones nearby after the toss or whatever, and they were just kind of like laughing about it. They were like, they're taking the ball, they want the ball. Okay, that's great. And yeah, it's the idea, whatever line of reasoning there was for why Shanahan might have had a case to do it that way, just kind of dries up in the face, I think, of the fact that it didn't actually work. Not his theory of how it might play out did not occur, so he was wrong.
Yeah, anytime that you're backed into a corner where you say in a competitive sport, in its most competitive apex, like the Super Bowl, like overtime of the Super Bowl, we want the ball third. It just doesn't
Yeah.
sound.
It sounds like an answer you come up with after you get caught not knowing what the actual rule is in the moment that you are subject to the rule, and you just sort of you reach for the nearest lying thing, and the best thing you got in the drawer is, oh, actually, we were thinking about the third possession. That's what we meant.
So looking ahead, we'll touch on this briefly before we get into talking some NFL draft. But this may or may not surprise you, but sportsbooks already have Super Bowl odds out for next year.
That's good.
What's that?
Oh no, it's just funny to me. I'm glad that society has reached that level of optimization that it's like, Super Bowl's over. That's fine. We have Super Bowl odds up.
Yeah. Like Nicole like just comes down with the ball, and it's like, well, actually, that's nice that you guys won the Super Bowl this year and all, but you're second in the odds.
John, they had the odds up before Mecole Hardman knew that they won. Like you saw that, right? Like he that is a very Mecole Hardman thing to do, though. Like catch an overtime Super Bowl touchdown and be like, I can't remember what we're supposed to do next. He's like, where do we? Am I in the right place?
I remembered on Sunday night to smash the retweet button on the one guy who I believe chirped you a couple years ago, saying, "Aren't you the Mecole Hardman guy?" It's like, yeah, buddy.
Absolutely. That's what I said. Why are you accusing me of it? The shirt says that already.
You're getting a lot of questions on this shirt that are answered by the shirt. But with these Super Bowl odds, they do have the Niners as the favorites. And I understand that the NFC is weaker than the AFC. I'm just fading the Niners next year. I don't know if I'm fading them for the division necessarily, but how much scar tissue is too much scar tissue when it comes to a team like this? I mean, each of the last 4 seasons have ended in like absolute miserable heartbreak for the Niners, and they've kept bouncing back. But I do wonder about Purdy's ability to reach another level. How well are they going to keep this core together? I saw some potential discontent from Brandon Ayuk and suggesting that he might leave this offseason.
I'm sorry. Could you tell me what that was about? I missed that.
This is classic like football hearsay. Look, today's day and age.
So a wide receiver posted a fortune cookie on Instagram, and now we're trying to figure out what it meant or something.
No, like his brother, I think, had like an Instagram story to the effect of like, "We've enjoyed our time here, but we're leaving. We're done with this crap," or something like that. But again, hearsay.
That'd be an insane opinion to have on either individual's part. But anyway, yeah, I'm just taking a quick look at their cap situation. They're a little bit over, but like a trivial amount.
Manageable.
They're basically even going in, and pretty much all the relevant people are still under contract, I think. I'm not seeing. I'm probably missing something, but most of the big names are still here. So unless someone holds out, be it Ayuk or I don't know some other person that if Hufanga held out or something, I don't know. Maybe that could put them in a little bit. If Purdy were to expect a deal, for instance, that might put them in a tough spot. But I'm guessing at this point Purdy's ready to ride out that whole like I'm such a humble farmer. I'll work for a can of beans or whatever. So maybe he won't hold out on them.
Yeah. I mean, he has gotten them to the NFC Championship in the Super Bowl.
He should hold out. He should hold out and say, "Give me like $35 million a year."
That would be funny.
Daniel Jones paid? I'll take that. Thank you.
It would be very funny for like his sort of presentation to the public through the media is like this aw shucks guy, and then like he's holding out like Terrell Owens style.
That'd be pretty good. It's like so it's funny to for me anyway, it's kind of funny to imagine how many people who are currently pushing Purdy hype largely do it because they're doing the rookie contract efficiency thing, and the like to them his utility is like he's the quarterback who plays wearing the barrel and the suspenders. Like that's specifically what makes him good.
That what an odd way to look at that. I can't. But beyond that, yeah, I'm just kind of out on the Niners for next year. I'll find any
I
and every
think they'll
way
be
to fade
tough.
them.
It will be interesting to watch what happens with the defensive coordinator spot. They scapegoated Steve Wilkes, which actually,
They sure did.
I had this. I think Kyle Shanahan will eventually wear out his welcome. Not so much with the owner, but like there's just going to be a point where the people who work with him kind of get fed up with him if things like that keep happening, like scapegoating Steve Wilkes. It's like maybe Steve Wilkes is not a great defensive coordinator or whatever, but he made a totally strong defense. Like everyone thought that defense was really good, and losing to Patrick Mahomes at like anecdotal points in a Super Bowl game is not indication that the defensive coordinator like failed to do their job. You know, it's like somebody's got to lose, and you don't have Mahomes, so it's probably going to be you. And they fired Wilkes. That kind of stuff can, sour a locker room if enough, if an influential player or two start to just kind of grumble enough.
This is true. That did strike me as an odd sort of moving of the deck chair when that occurred earlier.
I forgot, or I didn't teach the team the overtime rules in the Super Bowl. Someone's got to pay for this.
Steve, you know what that means. Yeah. But let's see. Beyond that, I don't know. I just worry that maybe not a collapse akin to what happened with the Eagles this year, but what I mean when I say that I'm fading the Niners, it's like the standard
at that price, those odds,
the level that they need to reach now is winning the Super Bowl. I can't in good conscience bet them to win the Super Bowl over the Chiefs, let alone when my odds are worse. So I'm just gonna leave that be. And if I were to take a longer shot in the NFC, Anthony, I know you're a big Lions guy in our chat, but for the value, why not the Packers? 20-1.
If Jordan Love keeps rolling like this, they're the kind of team that you really don't want to see in the playoffs, just because he's a quarterback who is basically scoring like 2.5 touchdowns a game.
Yeah, and they have so much of the offensive core locked and loaded, so it's hard to envision anything but yet another step forward for the Packers.
It isn't going to be Dallas.
Year.
It's it's going to be the Eagles. I don't think.
No, I don't think so either. So it just you work your way down the list. It's the Lions or the Packers, and the Lions will obviously be really tough. It's not a slam dunk that the Packers would be better, but that's where I'm gonna hitch my wagon in the NFC. And then just to round it out here, Chiefs plus 650, Ravens 9-1, Bills 10-1. Lions 12-1, Bengals 13-1. I think I might have some interest on the Bengals at 13-1.
Yeah, if they're keeping Lou Anarumo, that defense is they're not just going to find another Bates, but they'll get better next year than they were this year. And if Joe Burrow is back and himself, then that the Bengals. Yeah, I think Bengals and Packers are probably your best values there. Maybe the Lions.
Yeah, so we're looking at better than 10-1. I don't mind that. Don't mind that one bit. But Mario, let's go ahead. Let's dig into the meat of the show here. We're talking NFL draft. We're going to kind of really start this off in earnest, and we'll start things with at the 101 level. We're going to talk about the guys that everyone's heard of as we look ahead to this year's NFL draft. Obviously, it's been beaten over our heads since the last pick of last year's draft. This is supposed to be a loaded quarterback class. Everyone's heard of Caleb Williams, the 2022 Heisman winner. This past year didn't go quite as well for him. Drake Maye out of North Carolina, another guy that people have basically written in Sharpie as being a top 2 selection. Your other 2 quarterbacks that seem like legitimate candidates to go in the first round, everything else kind of up for debate. That would be Heisman winner from this year, Jayden Daniels, and then the very polarizing JJ McCarthy. So what say you? We'll start at the top about Caleb Williams.
So I've taken him as like a foregone conclusion at the first pick for, I guess, almost 2 years now. So he's at that point with me, and I guess a lot of people too, where they're kind of just bored with him, basically. And I think that's kind of it's made it easy for people to sort of overanalyze him. And I understand that we have to put a magnifying glass to especially when it's a presumed top overall pick, a quarterback. Like there's a higher level of scrutiny for that. But if you are scrutinizing Williams to the point that you start to think maybe one of these other quarterbacks should go ahead of him, that's, I think, where you're maybe going a little too far, because I can't see any sum of criticisms towards Williams that would exceed any of the other alternatives. So I am not really a big Williams fan exactly in the sense that like I don't have a strong feeling about what he is exactly beyond the distinction of the best quarterback in the class, and I don't know what that amounts to specifically, but he passes a lot of any productions standard test. He passes very easily, and even though he's short, he's pretty much stockily built. Not stocky, I guess he's heavy enough that he's not small. He's maybe somewhat short, but he's not small as a quarterback. So it seems like he, in the way that like Kyler Murray kind of checked enough boxes that you were just like, yeah, he's the top quarterback, whatever. Even though you didn't believe he was a Lawrence level prospect or even like a Stafford level prospect or anything like that. It's like Caleb Williams kind of fits into that category for me, where I'm like, I don't have a strong opinion about whether he'll be great in the NFL or not. But as far as anyone can tell, I don't know who else you're supposed to pick if you're, looking for the top quarterback.
Yeah, I think you can definitely point to the loudest of the Williams critics being the ones that are just most bored with him and wanting to be contrarian, because really even dating back to before he took a snap at Oklahoma, I think you time travel back with me to week 1 of the 2021 season, if you will, Mario. Spencer Rattler is a starter for Oklahoma, but Caleb Williams is the hotshot freshman. And OU is struggling against Tulane, and people are starting to clamor in the stands in Norman. They're like, bring out Caleb, bring out Caleb. They're all yelling for him. Caleb Williams runs for a touchdown in that game. Later on in that season, Caleb Williams helps lead Oklahoma to, I think it was a crazy victory. They might have lost that one, that Red River game against Texas, threw some unbelievable touchdowns in that game. That was the best Red River game in quite some time, in my opinion. And they never really looked back from there. And then Lincoln Riley leaves for USC. Caleb Williams goes to USC with him, wins the Heisman, and so on and so forth. And I know that this year didn't go as smoothly, and I think that the optics were such that anyone that felt like they wanted to hate on him, they got their ammo. Right, they see the finger paint with FU on it. They see him crying in the stands. They see him kind of complaining a lot when his offensive line is not holding up. But the numbers weren't demonstrably that much worse this year. Like in his Heisman year, he was throwing a touchdown on 8.4% of his passes with a 9.1 yards per attempt figure. This year, throwing a touchdown on a piddly 7.7 percent of his passes with a 9.4 yards per attempt mark. So the defense was awful this year. It really kind of fell apart. And I think that he was put in really tough positions a lot. I think his critics point to the fact that there isn't a lot of structure, or there isn't a lot of plays that you can point to that he's making consistently in structure. A lot of the stuff that he does is kind of freewheeling it, backyard style stuff. And therein lies, this sort of narrative where people will be like, or I think it's a straw man that people say, oh, I thought you said he was Patrick Mahomes. He's not Patrick Mahomes. It's like, if we're doing that, then like this whole argument is stupid. Like, just don't compare anybody to Patrick Mahomes, and let's try to have a normal debate.
That's what I mean too about, I feel like more than any other position, quarterback is tough to figure out, and there's only so much actual analysis we can do before we're sort of spinning our wheels and looking over the same circular path. And I think when you get up to that point, you have to sort of just call it maybe these rankings aren't perfect, but like here are the rankings as of now, kind of thing, and just move forward, because it's like we got to draft a run, we got to pick these players somehow. And Caleb Williams has passed the tests better than anyone else in the class has. So, like I said, he's not like a Lawrence level prospect, and if that's what a person demands of their first overall quarterback, I think they'll find themselves generally never wanting to take a quarterback in the top 5 or whatever. And you sort of just gotta. Sometimes the top quarterback is like a Matt Ryan type. It's just like you're not exactly psyched to spend this pick on a guy who you think is going to max out as like the quarterback 8 or whatever, but you would take the quarterback 8 if you can get it. And if that's all Williams is, it's still just open and shut. That's the kind of quarterback you take first overall.
Yeah, that's not a bust. That's a top 10 quarterback.
The Kyler Murray comp, I didn't mean it this way, but that also will apply in the kind of persistent, but I would call obnoxious and kind of certainly not helpful focus on just, oh, he's a zoomer. Look at like Kyler Murray doesn't, the video game thing, yes, but even aside from the video game thing with Kyler Murray, people were just kind of like, he's got a bad attitude, like all these zoomers do or whatever.
Oh, the Dan Patrick interview.
Yeah, Caleb Williams is going to get that kind of attention all the time. Like, media need to drive clicks. That kind of thing was bad even in the 90s or whatever, before they had the internet for newspapers and all that. But now it's just going to be so easy for like hack columnists, just Clay Travis and idiots like that are just going to froth at the mouth about Caleb Williams all the time and try to generate annoying headlines about him just for culture war reasons. So that will be, I don't know, it might be insignificant, but it'll be something of a distraction. I just think that there's a risk of having a stupid distraction for any player, really. I mean, even a guy like Tony Romo in the NFL is like, you remember how much the press hounded him, and it's like, well, how could anyone have a problem with Tony? He's not offending anybody. He's not. But there's just people that just issuing fatwas against him in the media all the time. So also, making your quarterback rankings on the basis of anticipated culture war media attention is probably the wrong policy, or the wrong rubric, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, people love to just place their misplaced emotions and feelings about stuff on these quarterbacks. Like, Caleb Williams exists in the 2023 landscape, or when he was in college. He's allowed to make money when he's playing at USC. So there's like a picture of his apartment, which really nice, as it probably should be for a Heisman winning quarterback at USC, and people are like, Reggie Bush is sick about this. It's like, you're sick about it, but you're also sick about it for like the wrong reasons, and you do the exact same thing and probably
he should live in a barn for 4 years.
Yeah, live in a box. Go to San Bernardino. Don't live in LA. Don't live in Hollywood and live it up.
Get rid of your LRG shirts and put on a barrel with suspenders.
Yeah, more barrel of suspenders talk. Absolutely.
It's an important theme.
That about seals it up for me. I'm a huge Caleb Williams
That's
fan.
how we know to move on to the next thing.
Yeah.
When the barrel of suspenders gets brought out.
I'm wearing my brown shirt. It's sort of barrel-y. I don't know. I can dig it. Let's get on to the supposed QB2. The guy who I frankly, hand up, I still have some digging to do. He's basically been anointed the next guy behind Caleb Williams for basically as long as Caleb Williams has been anointed as the number 1 guy. And that would be Drake Maye out of North Carolina. Your thoughts on him? He's probably like the more quote unquote conventional, or prototypical, however you want to put it, a little bit bigger, taller, heavier, more reliant on the passing. Although he ran more than Caleb Williams did.
Pretty big rushing production, yeah.
Yeah. 16 rushing touchdowns over the last 2 years. Caleb Williams had more, but he ran fewer attempts by a decent amount. But yeah, Drake Maye ran 184 times, in 2022, 112 times this past year, 16 combined rushing touchdowns in that span. Threw for 4,300 yards and 38 touchdowns as a true sophomore in 2022. The numbers dropped off a little bit this past year. I did spread things out a little bit more. Didn't have quite the supporting cast. Didn't have Josh Downs, of course, this past year. So the numbers fell off to 24 passing touchdowns, 9 interceptions as opposed to 7, 3,600 yards. The YPA just about the same, slightly better at 8.5 this past year as opposed to 8.4 as a sophomore. But when you look at the numbers, when you scan the film a little bit, what are we seeing here when it comes to Drake Maye?
Maye is one of those prospects that's really tough for me. I am pretty much agnostic on him. I was kind of this way with Justin Herbert too, and that basically I turned out to be too low on Herbert. And the reason I don't know what the exact reason, honestly, that I can't take a side is I guess part of it is that his numbers aren't exactly infallible. Like you said, they fell off this year for Maye to the point that it becomes they're the kind of numbers that are less like, oh, this is obviously an NFL prospect, and more, I can't tell whether this guy is one. Like sometimes, Caleb Williams' numbers, for instance, are just really, really, really strong, whatever way you look at it. Whereas with Maye, he's got pretty strong numbers from 2022. And then in 2023, 63.3% of his passes completed, 8.5 yards per attempt. That's particularly also with the interception rate going up and the touchdown percentage going way down. Like that's all of that happening at once, seemingly just because Josh Downs left. But didn't they also get that Toledo transfer?
Tez Walker, he missed about the first month or so of the season, but it was a big factor. Once he came on, he accounted for about a quarter of the target share once he was active the rest of the way.
Okay, so it's like Maye lost Downs, yes, but he didn't just get left out in the cold.
The first month of the season, you're not really playing anyone that difficult either.
Yeah, and Howell wasn't Howell left with less. Like Howell, after he had like De'Ami Brown and Newsome or whatever, it's like he had, I feel like, less and had better numbers.
Freshman Josh Downs and nobody.
Yeah, and Howell's numbers held up a little better than Maye's did. However, college production certainly is not everything with evaluating pro quarterback prospects. Anthony Richardson's a good example of that last year. It's just in the case of Mitchell, for me anyway, it was more obvious looking at him, and especially when he ran like the 4.43 at 245 pounds or whatever. It's like, okay, clearly the tools are just off the chart with this guy, and especially because he's so young, that he is otherwise, raw with poor production is excusable.
That's Richardson.
Sorry, what's that?
Richardson? Or
yeah, that's Richardson. Whereas like he had all those things making up for the lack of obviously good production. I don't know whether, we know Maye's not going to run like a 4.43 or whatever. But yeah, you have to have rare tools to easily offset production concerns. And Maye is in that first round category for me. I feel safe saying that, and I expect him to be a top 15 pick, but I don't know. He might be. I don't know. For instance, maybe it's not so obvious why Maye would be a better prospect than someone like Jordan Love was. Someone more like in the late first round, something like that. So, just one or two teams having different opinions can make a guy like that go as high as the 10th pick and fall to the 25th or whatever in other scenarios. And I just don't know how to call it with Maye. Like I feel like there's some kind of projection that I basically don't know enough about quarterbacks to call. So he's going to go, I figure, second among quarterbacks, and I don't know where that is exactly, but I would guess in the top 8.
Yeah, just the way that the quarterback market works in the NFL draft, even if it's not the exact order that we have right now, Drake Maye will go in the first 8.
How about this, John? At the very least, he should be much better than someone, like Daniel Jones. Like I feel like they had similar kind of aesthetics coming out, being, run heavy ACC quarterbacks who are kind of tall and lanky. But Maye had way better rushing production and had way better passing production. And if the arm strength is there, if there's nothing goofy in his throwing motion or his footwork or whatever, then yeah, I have, as much as I'm not making the proactive case for him, I also don't really have an easy case to make against him.
I don't know. I also prefer like quarterbacks that win a little bit. And I don't really feel like. I mean, not to Caleb Williams. Obviously, had a terrible, or USC had a terrible year this past year, but I don't know. Some feels just a little bit too like made in a laboratory when it comes to Drake Maye. I'm just not all the way there yet. I still require a little bit more studying. Before we move on to Jayden Daniels, we do have a question in the chat, Mario, that our guy Greg Jennings has been waiting for us to answer. So quickly, what do we think the Bears are doing with the first pick? Is Caleb Williams going to be a Bear and Justin Fields to be traded? That's kind of where I'm thinking things will go now, despite my what I would do personally. I think I would keep Fields, and trade that pick for Hall. I don't know.
Yeah, I feel like the Bears should just take, or okay, the receivers are good enough at the top that they don't need to take Harrison, in my opinion. And if they can trade back and get Harrison, all the better. So yeah, ideally trade back, but I guess it would strike me as very Poles brained to take Williams, if only because well, I guess in his case it's like getting the rookie contract thing, but also conventional GM survival instinct would dictate that too. It's like you get the rookie prospect that everyone finds promising and both like grants patience toward due to that promise and gives you, the GM, like credit for it and basically like insularity, job security. So you can come off of like another, 7-10 season as the Bears GM, but if the rookie quarterback you took first overall has a strong final 6 games, you might get 2 whole years out of that just from that month and a half happening the way it did when it did. So yeah, there's a lot of kind of cynical reasons that push polls toward Williams for just, again, cynical job survival reasons. But to me, to win, it's Fields that you keep going with. And the reason I say that is, as much as people have otherwise legitimate gripes about Fields' passing production, if you look at the passing stats to DJ Moore and Cole Kmet, they're excellent, and it's everything else that's awful. So to me, it seems as simple as like, well, what if you put a Marvin Harrison Jr. on the field too? And then all of a sudden, I think you would have a passing game that no one complains about anymore. But the other thing is, I don't understand. I don't have a sense of what the market is supposed to be for Fields. Like, everybody's just slandering him. It's been this way for like 2 years. All this complaining about Fields, everyone's just whining about him as a passer. And now I'm to believe someone's going to step up and give the Bears like a good trade. Like, are they really going to take Caleb Williams if it forces their hand into trading Fields for like a 3rd rounder or something? And I think that could be where they put themselves, especially if teams keep doing this stuff where they do this like 3-year plan version of building where that leads them to say, for instance, last year, like, we don't want to trade for Lamar Jackson. We don't think we need it. We have this Desmond Ridder plan, and we like our 3-year budget says that it'll really be a good EPA gain if we could get him to turn into a good quarterback. Like, teams doing stuff like that could lead to a surprising number of teams. Even before they get to the question of what they actually think of Fields, it could lead them to say, no, we're trying to get this guy on a cheaper rookie deal. We're going with, we think he sucks, but we know he's cheap, and that's all that matters to us. Like, that's polluting the market. So I don't know. It would be silly to me, in my opinion, but also the background there is I don't think Williams is a better prospect than Fields. So yeah, I'd go with Fields, but granted, it seems like the more like cynical logic would lead polls to take Williams, regardless of what Fields gets in a trade, just because there might be that media momentum in like November after a rough start to the year. If Williams just starts, wins like quarterback of the month or whatever in 1 month against, 3 cupcake defenses, like that kind of thing could generate so many headlines about the genius polls, that kind of thing can build an enduring brand for, if he's cynical, like it's all just right there for him to take.
Yeah. So, yeah, I don't know. There seems to have been a lot of steam. I don't know if it's coming from anywhere legitimate, but a lot of, and these markets are always iffy. But it's like Justin Fields is like the favorite to be the next Steelers quarterback or the next Falcons quarterback. So we'll see if things.
Some teams could really use him. Both of those teams really could use him.
I know. I actually am terrified of the prospect of Fields in Pittsburgh, and oddly enough, with the Arthur Smith like offense. I think that he could
Oh
actually
man,
get quite a
that would
lot
be
out of
hell
it.
for you, yeah. And it would, for me, it would be funny though to watch all the people complaining about how like the Steelers are winning a bunch and leading the division with Mike Tomlin and Justin Fields, yes, but they're not doing it the right way. They're not throwing enough. It's bad. It's not fair. That kind of stuff would definitely happen.
Yeah. So yeah, and then all the while, like the Steelers would keep beating the Ravens, and I would be down bad as per usual. Okay, before we get on over to Jayden Daniels, let's go ahead and listen to some messages from our friends over at Blue Wire. All right, we're on to the next quarterback, the reigning Heisman Trophy winner, Jayden Daniels. I don't think he's going to be a good pro.
I'm sorry, I accidentally spoke over you there. What was your question?
Jayden Daniels. I just said I don't think he's going to be a good pro.
Oh, okay. God, how rude of me to just hit the snare drum right during your hot take. No, I agree with you though. I am not that sold on Daniels. There are some plays that he makes that are definitely awesome and definitely can work in the NFL. His ability to land some of these downfield touch passes, that's I think if you have an offense that is committed to running often, getting him a decent offensive line, some downfield speed at receiver, you can, as an offensive coordinator, play off the tension that his downfield passing ability has by exploiting his rushing ability underneath, and vice versa. And that was the story of Lamar Jackson's first MVP season. This was like, especially at the time, defenses were like, well, how the hell do we stop the go route if we have to bring somebody down in the box to make sure he doesn't run off the edge every time? And they kind of went the whole year with defenses never figuring out how to do it. And if Daniels can present a similar threat, but what I don't see is the frame or the varied passing skill set necessary to scale up his usage. What I mean by that is, I think if he's in an offense that makes him throw the ball more than like 28 times a game and run it more than 6 times, something will probably get weird and in a bad way. I do think though, if you have there's sometimes like weird moments in the NFL, the way a team and their personnel and their scheme might interact with the rest of the league. And I'm thinking of the Eagles specifically 2 years ago. It's like once they had AJ Brown there, Devontae Smith, Jalen Hurts, they put together for about a year and a half this offense that no one could stop at all. And it seems like we've seen them figure out the answer to that. But if something like that can still exist, which is to say, again, like the Jalen Hurts usage of 2 years ago, where he'd throw the ball like 25 times a game and run 10 times maybe, but they protected him as a passer. They gave him cover as a passer by not overexposing him the way that they did in 2023. I think if that first version of the contained pass attempt volume, if that's still a viable setup, then Daniels can make that same impact Hurts did, I think. But even then, you're talking about probably the best offensive line in the league: AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert, and an era where the rest of the league's defenses just didn't know what to do about your scheme, So I don't know how. I think at the very least, Daniels is a little situation specific. I think there are some situations that he would work well, but I don't think he will ultimately be what a lot of people want him to be, and fair expectations or not.
Yeah, I mean the numbers were so cartoonishly good this past year, and I thought that he was a deserving Heisman despite LSU losing some games. It's kind of a weaker sauce Heisman crop that this year. Usually you prefer it to be a little bit more memorable than what it was this year, but that's again not Jayden Daniels' fault. To your point on like the Hurts thing, I think it's an interesting comparison. I just also think that he's not going to get drafted in that type of spot with that type of team. Like the Eagles were able to, like, I don't know if that loophole is closed forever. I mean, well, I guess
not. I don't know
mean,
either.
The Niners got Brock Purdy and with the last pick. Have you heard this? Have you seen this? But the Eagles were already like a pretty good team. They had some issues. They were late stage Carson Wentz and all that, but they were able to get Jalen Hurts in the door in the second round. Like Jayden Daniels is going to go somewhere that's bad in almost all
Someplace
likelihood.
bad that's paying a lot of money to really bad consultants who are going to say the way to win, the way to get the most EPA is to make your string bean quarterback throw it 40 times, even though he can only make like 2 kinds of throws. And sorry, the reason I'm down on Daniels is passing grade, especially in the volume sense. Like I don't think he can throw the ball 35 times in an NFL game without risking things going very badly. And the reason I say that is his first 2 years in college were at Arizona State, where he was a totally good college quarterback, and especially by the standards of a true freshman, but he actually had really good receivers to throw to there, and he couldn't keep it together if they threw it more than 20 times in a game. And who I'm referring to specifically is one, Brandon Ayuk, senior. The last year Arizona State had Ayuk. Daniels was the quarterback, and they even had Ricky Pearsall before he transferred to Florida. They had Kyle Williams and Frank Darby, who were both totally good college starters. Darby got drafted by the Falcons. So Daniels had a bunch of NFL caliber receivers around him at Arizona State. Couldn't throw the ball, not with any volume anyway. So that's pretty concerning to me. And then, of course, he only really went off in this 2023 year. Even at LSU last year, his numbers looked more like the Arizona State numbers.
Yeah, I mean, like it was a take that I ended up eating, of course, because Jayden Daniels won the Heisman, but I was not convinced going into this past season that he was the best quarterback on that roster. Like I
sometimes
thought,
experience really does just kind of take a player like him into a totally different place. And like once they get to the NFL and they don't have that same experience advantage, the whole thing can fall apart.
Yeah, I thought Nussmeier should have been the quarterback for them this year going in. Obviously, I was wrong. Although LSU again did lose a bunch of games.
Great college offense. I guess they called it right, but yeah, we're in this here prospect game. We've got bigger ambitions.
Grade with the sharper pencil,
we got
man.
Dynasty rankings in mind. Yeah,
we do. So yeah, I'm skeptical. Like I don't hold the age against him necessarily. It's just like when were the good seasons, but before this year,
right?
And even as a June, like. Admittedly, Arizona State was starting to fall apart in his junior year. Like that's why he left, I think. But 300 pass attempts, 301 in 2021. So as a junior, his third year starting, 10 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. Like that's really bad. Really.
Yeah. So,
and then, this past year, 327 attempts, 40 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. So you could say that, that's obviously growth. I think you could also say that, the getting like the likes of Malik Nabers and Brian Thomas and everybody else like that doesn't explain a 30 touchdown difference. Like Jayden Daniels definitely improved over that time, but like I struggle to see him developing much further. I think he's a little bit skinny, so I worry about him holding up against the hits. He's such an explosive runner at the college level, but I reject any sort of Lamar Jackson comp that comes to him as
we were Lamar fans. This is not a Lamar situation.
Not really even that close.
No, not at all.
A lot of wide open spaces running.
It's almost more like a Kenny Pickett situation, but if like the player was way cooler.
Yeah. So bottom line here, folks, Jayden Daniels is going to get drafted high. You don't have.
I don't know if he will. I think he could fall past 15 and get picked by like a team trading up from the second round. Somewhere around the 20th pick, but I don't think he's going ahead of Maye. I think also Daniels is at risk of falling behind this other guy that we might get to.
Oh yeah. Well, is there anything else you'd like to add on Daniels before we, I
think he can be totally good if he's in an offense that keeps him under 30 pass attempts and doesn't expect him to be a Lamar Jackson level runner. If he can run in just a selective sense, like when the play is there, do a lot of damage to the defense without taking a lot of hits. That kind of stuff in a robust run heavy offense, I think it can work. But I'm worried that in today's game with the various consultant interests out there, there will always be pressure on a player like him to be a player that he just doesn't have the traits to be.
As a podcaster, I invested in sound canceling coasters for my coffee mug, but I even made the slightest sound there, and it caused my dog to grumble.
I didn't hear it, and you know what? I think dogs do have more sensitive ears to high pitches, and thus the dog whistle invention.
Well, yeah, I suppose he can hear a lot better than I can, but here I am thinking that my silly little foam coaster can
But
save
I'm
me.
also
But
a bad source though, because I listen to like brain damaging volumes of metal music every day. So
you do. I've
I
been to
might
shows
be
with you.
slightly poor of hearing.
We do have a question in the chat, but before we get into McCarthy, and I think the way that this pod is trending, that this might take up the bulk of our receiver talk. We are gonna. I don't know. I'm trying to think what's the best way for. We're gonna answer it. We're gonna answer it right now.
I'll be
Jay,
fast.
Jay wants to know. Just joined in. This is again on the topic of receivers. Why is Malik Nabers fluctuating all of a sudden? Earlier in the year, seemingly the second receiver off the board. Obviously, Marvin Harrison Jr. has kind of been locked in there for quite some time. Sort of the wide receiver analog to Caleb Williams, of course. Now we're seeing Nabers ranked below Rome Odunze, outside the top 10 occasionally. I hadn't seen that personally where
Yeah,
Nabers
John,
has a slide, but
I think we can answer this in the form of a tease for the later part too.
hmm,
Speaking for myself anyway, I think Nabers might be the best receiver in the draft. So I think any fluctuation in like dynasty markets is just people kind of like spinning their wheels with nothing to do and having to make picks despite not getting new information. You get everybody already has shares of Nabers, and now they're trying to diversify, and that's probably driving market demands too. So anyway, they're all really really good is the other thing.
they are. So yeah, I think this is a can't go wrong type of deal. But like, yeah, I don't expect Neighbors to slide. I wonder if that would maybe come from him being maybe a little bit smaller at 6 foot two
I
hundred.
think
But
Neighbors, like wherever he goes to, I don't care for dynasty purposes. Like he's gonna be awesome.
yeah, sort of
They're
like
all really, really good. Odunze, Harrison, Neighbors, they're really, really, really good. And it's kind of like I don't even care to rank them at a certain point.
yeah, just like they're all clustered in that tier one for you type of dealio, and wherever they end up, great. But all three of them are going to be successful at the next level. But yeah, I don't expect any like the pendulum will swing back. I think is what I'm trying to say. If there's any
Yes.
slide, give it 2 weeks when the combine starts, and we'll have this resettled once again. I think you're right that people are just bored right now. All right. Last quarterback that we'll discuss in depth, man of the hour, the guy that is really generating some discourse on Twitter, Mr. JJ McCarthy, national champion JJ McCarthy. JJ McCarthy, who threw all of like 10 passes in college. I'm kidding, of course. But again, Michigan certainly would have been fine with him throwing just 10 passes in college, and they probably still would have won a lot of games. They did win a game this year against Penn State in Happy Valley, in which he did not throw a single pass in the
Oh,
second
that's so
half.
cool. Oh, I thought you were gonna say I thought they did the Mac Jones. That would have been
Close. I
awesome.
mean, he was 7 for 8, and then yeah. So it was like the college the spread version of the Mac Jones game up in Buffalo. But
yeah, as far as how he fits into the Michigan machine, I would almost have to compare McCarthy's effect to Purdy's on the 49ers, where it's like, yeah, as far as the numbers themselves, you're not going to be able to make a case against it. The returns speak for themselves. Really high efficiency, high explosiveness, really clean numbers. The McCarthy's numbers are a very clear portrait of an offense that is basically doing what it wants and winning pretty much all the time, without him doing a whole lot. So that second part there, it's like, is it that he doesn't do a whole lot because they don't need him to, or is it that he doesn't do a whole lot because he cannot? Sometimes it's either one, and I don't know how to call it so easily. What he has going for him is his production is again super super clean. So sometimes you can kind of spot a fraud just with some little number where you're like, wait, I don't see this stat very often. It can't be a great sign that it's here in his case. But with McCarthy, everything's really clean. But there aren't really maybe I forgot to check the most recent year, but they're in his second to last year anyway. He had no games where he threw the ball a lot against a good opponent and did well, and it's possible that he can go an entire season on that team never seeing both a good defense and a game where he is asked to throw the ball more than 25 times. But there's just like no history of him carrying the team. So it's all projection, and I don't know. Like I know I was expressing all those reasons for skepticism toward Jayden Daniels. I think in a way, how do you say this? I don't see the obvious way McCarthy could be better than Daniels, and I feel like McCarthy has not either because he hasn't had the chance or because he couldn't. He didn't prove as much as Daniels has. And so I feel like there's a whole lot of projection with McCarthy where you can just you can assume the best in every case and be optimistic in every detail. And if all those assumptions are correct, yes, he would be very good. But I feel like that's also the same game people played with Zach Wilson, who incidentally really looks a lot like McCarthy. Not, I don't know, on the field. I have no idea if he has that particularly infuriating like cherub appearance that Wilson does, but McCarthy on the field with
got
a helmet
little bit
on,
more toughness to his visage.
He's yeah, okay. So he doesn't have that one problem that Wilson did, but the same frame, almost exactly the same frame. They look the same on the field. And also Zach Wilson's final year at BYU, the reason why I personally did not get on board with him, even though the numbers were conventionally excellent.
Yeah, they're sick.
The numbers, they were infallible numbers, basically. I still couldn't take it seriously because when you watch the tape of Wilson play, every single snap is a game of 500 with him. It's like he kind of just sits back. There's no pass rush within, at times, literally like 10 yards of him. I don't even understand how it's like he would get so far away from the pass rush, you'd think there was like an illegal man downfield happening, but they'd almost stop trying to rush him, it felt like. So he'd have all the time, it's T-ball playing football, it's like he's just sitting back, kind of picking whatever he wants to do. And he is making some, nice, accurate, high velocity throws downfield through windows that are not easy to get the ball through, and showing that is helpful. It's a demonstration of a trait, but we don't know does he have the processing ability to make it work in practice, and the practice being an NFL game, NFL regular season game. Being able to do a bunch of like trick shots is cool, and being able to do trick shots can be helpful at some point. Throwing velocity like that, accuracy like he throws on some throws, that will be helpful, certainly. But we don't know as much about whether he can kind of carry an offense and sort of. We don't know about his ability to read a defense when the whole design of the offense doesn't give him cover from a low volume of pass attempts. It's like he in other words, he's never really had to stick his neck out a whole lot to do anything at Michigan. And so again, when you're untested at best, theoretically, the best case scenario could be the answer to the unknown variable, but it might not be either. It might be something really bad.
Yeah, I think you absolutely have to acknowledge the potential downside here. I mean, only 2 years as the starter at Michigan, appeared in a ton of games as a freshman, but, wasn't asked to do a ton, obviously. And, when he was starting, wasn't asked to do a ton either. I mean, we're talking about like 660 pass attempts, 327 pass attempts a year over his 2 seasons. So that's, I mean, the passing volume, you're not going to find it. The efficiency, I think that it's been fine. I mean, it jumped a decent bit this past year, his first year starting, 64% completion rate, 8.4 yards per attempt this past year, bumped that up to 72% completion rate and 9 yards per attempt. So, he was basically asked over the last 2 years to throw 28 times or fewer per game, had 22 touchdowns in each of those 2 seasons.
So John, if I can interrupt for a second, the only times McCarthy went over 30 pass attempts the last 2 years and did well were against Purdue, who got pushed over pretty easily, Indiana, who I assume does not have one of the nation's better defenses nowadays, and we have a TCU bowl game that they lost, and he had 2 turnovers to 2 touchdowns. The only other time was against Illinois, where he threw 34 passes in a 19-17 win, and he did awful in that one.
Yeah, they barely won that game. Blake Corum got hurt, and everything got kind of wacky after that. I mean,
he might be a Blake Corum merchant,
which I'm completely welcome to that idea. But I think whereas Jayden Daniels, I think he's closer to that finished product. Like, again, the downsides there potentially for McCarthy, and people laugh at the pregame sitting under the field goal posts, feet together and all that, and working on his breathing, whatever. I don't really care one way
Is he a
how a
Zen
guy
guy?
gets ready for. Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. I don't remember
But
Zen quarterback.
but like through like a very like Zoomer way of doing it is like, yeah, I just found this way to like chill out on YouTube when I was like 12, and I do it now, even at the Rose Bowl. But you know, I like McCarthy. Like I can see it. Like I think if you watch the film, you can see it a decent bit. I think the arm's there. I think the athleticism and the mobility's there. I think he's
Oh
young
yeah.
enough to where he can add some weight to the frame. I think you could easily point me out as a fool for saying Jayden Daniels is too skinny when he's listed at 204 pounds or 210 pounds, and then not say anything about McCarthy when he's listed at 203. But like again, McCarthy I think is just 21. I think that he's got time to
Oh
bulk
man, he
up.
does look unfortunately similar to Zach Wilson. I take it back. He's a Midwestern, or maybe not from Michigan. Wherever he's from, he's that region's version of Zach Wilson.
No, he's more Chad than that. Come on.
Well, anyway, I am not actually lowering his prospect grade over this. It's the on-field similarities that raise concern for me. But you're right. He has a ton of really good plays, and again, the production is super super clean. So you can't really hold it against him. It's just that the reality is some of the competition that he's going against in the draft at quarterback have taken the test that he simply has not to this point. And
that's very well said. Yeah.
But anyone holding against, it is possible that teams will hold Daniels' answers to those tests against him more than they hold McCarthy for not taking it at all. And McCarthy going in the top 10 should not shock anyone.
No, it really shouldn't. And like, I don't think that you can know it's a bad pick. Like we're just not gonna know.
Sometimes you just got to punt, and like I would get more critical if people were pushing in the top 3 or something like that. But if he goes like 8, 9, 10, if Zach Wilson had gone 8, 9, or 10, I wouldn't have put so much criticism in writing about him, So it's
so
like,
the Jets
kind of got
saying
bailed out
in
by
March, Jets in March were just like, yeah, no, he's our pick. Like,
yeah,
not only do we know that Trevor Lawrence is getting picked first, but we're just going to go ahead and even lessen the drama in a class that went straight to drama.
They went straight to media massaging the pick. They just like February 8th. It's like that's weird. New York Daily News is talking about how great of a second overall pick Zach Wilson will be. I didn't even know he was good. Anyway.
Yeah, exactly. And then last thing that I mean to say on McCarthy when it comes to the production and everything, I think team context is really important when it comes to looking at him. Like Michigan is about as run first of a Power 5 offense and ground and pound and
play
defense.
The game the right way.
The last 3 years they've made the playoffs. They obviously won the national championship this past year. They're just beating the crap out of people. Like that's just what they did. Like they just didn't really need to air it out. So I mean, this will kind of like dovetail when we break down further, like a Roman Wilson versus some of the other receivers in this class that obviously have a ton more volume production to point to, and you got to kind of like squint a little bit to understand why he might be a good pro and everything. But yeah, bottom line is, McCarthy just wasn't asked to air it out, and I think you bring up some good points. The instances where he kind of didn't really impress us all that much, but I'm willing to take the plunge on this one and err on the side of I'm more expecting that he'll be a good NFL quarterback than a total bust. But
yeah,
again, he is the great unknown in this quarterback class.
Yeah, even Wilson should have been a much better NFL player than he turned out to be. Even if he was some kind of bust, there's all kind of weird like personality issues with him. So McCarthy will probably be a decent enough starter, and I think I would expect him to go ahead of Daniels, and I don't know where that is. Maybe 8 to 12 or something. But I'm not quite on board with the top 3 talk. As in, I don't believe it. I'm definitely not on board with it as a good idea either.
No. It'd be kind of funny if New England drafted him at 3, but let's see. So we're looking at, as far as places that would potentially be willing to take a quarterback, Atlanta at 8, Well, after that, then you got the Bears at 9, but we're kind of expecting them to have taken Caleb Williams already. The Jets at 10.
My favorite NFL analysts would advise the Bears to take a quarterback at the 9th pick too. So that would be
double
cool.
your chances. It'll that you can always run a 2 quarterback offense. So I guess that makes sense that the Broncos or the Raiders would be the kind of sweet spot.
Yeah, he's not falling out of the top 12. I think we can say, and maybe I was even too low on Daniels' stock to think he might fall to the 20th or something. It's like, I guess all of these guys should end up, even if trade ups need to happen, these guys should all go in the top 15.
Unrelated. If you're Seattle, would you draft a quarterback if one of them's available?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it depends on where they're at 16. If they don't have to trade up, sure. But there's also a case, I think, against not taking Daniels. I assume it's going to be Daniels or we didn't get to talk about Bo Nix at all, but I actually am a little bit. I think I remain a Nix truther and think he might be involved in all of this too. But yeah, I think you can take some other actual starter at 16 if you're the Seahawks and maybe just trade back up and, you justify Daniels sitting on the bench for a year by it was next year's pick. Who cares?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You want to say anything about Nix?
I'm like I am pretty much all of these guys. I'm agnostic to some degree, but the numbers we do not see very often. Like those kinds of numbers from Nix are like Joe Burrow level production. And that's even if you're a 9th year guy, even if the team is helpful, even if you got a great supporting cast, Nix put up the kind of numbers that are just, for me, not easy to look past. And not that I don't have any insight on just why that scheme made it so easy for him. It clearly did. I mean, I know Nix, however good he is, he's not quite as good as those numbers at Oregon look. We
2 offensive coordinators.
Yeah. So, I mean, the thing is, when I watch the tape of him, I think he makes all the same cool trick shots that McCarthy does, except Nix is, throwing it 15 more times a game and doing a lot more stuff. So, yeah, I will probably have Nix ahead of McCarthy, my personal rankings, and probably ahead of Daniels in my personal rankings. But, yeah, it seems like I'm missing something. It doesn't seem like everyone else is seemingly assuming like Nix is a 3rd rounder or something.
I would guess age and probably overweighing how bad the Auburn sample is. But I think
I guess it's just like I think his Auburn sample is better than Daniels' Arizona State sample.
Well said. Okay, that's an excellent touche. I'm going to.
But he is 24, so that is pretty old. Yeah,
he is. But I thought Nix was the best player in college football this year. I thought he would have been a slam dunk for the Heisman if not for the
and that's who Pittsburgh should take. That would be a real pain for you.
I think what's I don't mean to what's his name this guy Field Yates I believe had Nix going to the Steelers in the draft at 20. I thought that was interesting, and it's interesting that you say that as well because you're more of like a mock draft creator more than a consumer. So it's not like you're.
Yeah, I don't read mock drafts except for when I'm like, okay, who told Daniel Jeremiah, that this guy's going to go in the 1st round, and I don't know it, so I better go learn that now.
Right. But Nix was totally electric these last 2 years at Oregon. Totally.
And they aren't dinking dunk throws. Like he's going downfield and he's throwing, throws that have some amount of peril to them. It's just, yeah, granted, the level of dominance in those stats is like the defense was completely helpless against this.
This is true. Having to defend potential RB1 Bucky Irving, having to defend against a slew of like old Alabama transfer guys, and of course my dude Troy Franklin. So I mean it's a lot to contend with. And like what Mario Cristobal left behind that Dan Lanning has been able to keep up. And what I liked so much about what Cristobal did at Oregon was he built like an SEC sized offensive line in the Pac-12. And it's just like, that's a really good starting point. If you want to win a lot of games in the Pac-12 is just have far and away the best offensive line. Although I suppose this year it was Washington that earned that distinction. They made it all the way to the Natty. as well. But yeah, I like Knicks. The Knicks versus Daniels idea, very, very interesting to me because, again, I'm not the biggest Daniels guy in the world, but we might be running out of a little bit of runway for Knicks as far as development goes. But,
oh yeah, he's like finished product or whatever.
Yeah, but maybe that finished product is good enough. Let's shift gears. Let's talk some receivers here. This will be again no surprise to anyone that's listening and has been paying attention to draft coverage. There really isn't much in the way of first round running back discourse this year, let alone maybe even like top 50 picks running back discourse. But there is a lot of talent in this wide receiver class. And I think that, you can potentially see 3 go in the top 10 between Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Nabers, and Odunze. I think that guys, it's a lot of people are there. There's sort of how do you say, like a revolving door between picks 28 and 32. I do read too many mock drafts. You can kind of like tell a writer's bias one way or the other by who they put there, but there's almost always a different receiver there at the end of the first round getting mocked to somebody, whether it is Troy Franklin, whether it is A.D. Mitchell, whether it's Roman Wilson. I think I even saw in one of them.
I think that's a little too high.
Probably a little
we'll
rich.
have to get to that Wilson in another episode, but yeah, that he's an interesting prospect, just more like a round 3 type to me.
Yeah, but if he lights up the combine, we might see around 2. But
the book is not
for anybody
finished. Yeah.
So let's go ahead. Start at the top. Is Marvin Harrison Jr. as good as advertised?
I might not have kept up perfectly with what everyone is saying about him. I think it's safe to say he is not, a Calvin Johnson level prospect. He's not to me a Jamar Chase level prospect. He also to me isn't obviously better than Drake London or somebody like that. But I mean, for what it's worth, I'm really high on Drake London, so I don't consider that an insult. But I have seen some people kind of speak of Harrison as if he is at least Jamar Chase and maybe even more than that. And that seems a little crazy to me. Granted, if Harrison tests a certain way at the combine, I'll have to change my tune a little bit. But part of what I'm doing here is I don't see a whole lot of rare athletic traits. What I see with Harrison is an incredibly it's almost as if his father might have been one of the previously most well-known technicians at receiver in NFL history, because it looks like the younger Marvin has been going through wide receiver drills since he was like born, basically. And the technical details with him, it is pretty remarkable, actually. Like how everything that he does wide receiver task wise, running routes, positioning himself relative to the defense, everything is a black belt level, and you can see that. And so for me, the question about Harrison is like, depending on the workout details anyway. Like if he really checks in at like 6'4", 210 and runs a 4.4 flat or something, I might have to say, okay, actually maybe he is a Jamar Chase level prospect or something like that. But I don't expect that. I expect him to athletically be more similar to someone like Michael Pittman or something, but just better. So what that equals in the NFL, I don't really know, but I think the profile for Harrison trends towards something like, a guy who can catch 120 passes for you in his best year, and he can catch you 100 passes per year regularly at above average efficiency. And that might sound, I don't know if that sounds like a stingy projection or something. To me, a player who enters that category is one who's like in the all-decade conversation right there. So I think he's going to be some version of very good, but I really don't see an easy, obvious way to distinguish Harrison, to rank him ahead of Odunze or Nabers.
But so with the combine metrics that you spat out there as a potential, like, okay, we got to take this seriously as like a literal like rarefied type of prospect in the same vein as a Jamar Chase. You think there's a chance that he's like kind of a supercharged Mike Williams?
Maybe. Yeah, I don't see
because he's not like always running away from the defense. Like he's so good at like
I
turning
think the only
and
reason he
finding the ball and
wouldn't.
catching it.
Yeah, I think Harrison's just going to. He reminds me of Pittman in the sense too that like he will draw high usage underneath because he gives such an easy, like 8 yards and stuff. Even though his numbers are really big, even though there's lots of highlights of Harrison making big plays, part of what stands out with him is the way that he can kind of just grind through the defense underneath. And when a receiver can do that, it's a lot easier to set up like double moves and just slight variations of routes, and that opens up the big play downfield. Like I think Drake London was again a lot like that. I feel like London's kind of more the comparison for me, but not in this. I don't know what anyone thinks about London as a downfield threat. I know that Mike Williams has at least somewhat recently been known as like a downfield guy, like a jump ball guy downfield. Like I think Harrison and London can both do that kind of play. I just think they don't need to. I think they get open on like easier, more conventional routes, and so they're not really making the highlight catch downfield because they don't need to even strain that hard to move the ball against the defense. But it's hard to tell for me anyway. It's hard to tell from a game tape who for sure is any level of fast or slow. Longer limbed guys like Harrison sometimes have strides that just look slower than they are, and if he turns out to be faster than I thought, then at that point it's like, yeah, there's literally no way for a defense to adjust to Harrison if he's running like a sub 4.5. If he's running a 4.5 or something, that's fine. It's just these are the hairs we have to split to kind of figure out who's going to be very good versus the best maybe at their position.
And being an Ohio State guy, I'm probably expecting him to test pretty well. So
he might. The one thing I want to say about Harrison is that there's this assumption that he's definitely the top receiver. I expect him to be the first receiver drafted, but I don't think there's much distance between him and the other two, pending workout metrics anyway, if only because like we've seen guys put up these numbers, right? We've seen Olave and Wilson put up, I think even bigger numbers. We've seen Jackson Smith and Jigba put up bigger numbers. This is with Stroud at quarterback. That team was rolling like crazy. I know Harrison did really well this last year too, but it's just that the Ohio State wide receiver position will be really productive, and I think we know that Olave and Wilson set a certain bar. I personally am not convinced that Harrison reaches it or eclipses it, but that seems to be the assumption right now.
Yes, that it is the assumption that he is the best of that group.
Better than Smith and Jigba, easily. I'll say that much.
Yeah, that I can certainly get to, but Olave and Garrett Wilson,
God. It's a high bar. People are getting bored with them already. It's like it is not easy to be as good as those two.
No, it is not. Garrett Wilson rocks. Chris Olave rocks. I'd love to see them both get adequate quarterback play. All right, Malik Nabers, teach the class.
Well, things just as they're kind of unsettled for me with Marvin Harrison, pending the workout metrics. The same is true of Nabers. All of these guys are written in pencil for me in the current order that they're in. But what we know about Nabers in the meantime is his production was uniquely strong at the college football level. Like I would say his production was at least as good as Harrison's, arguably better, but more likely just the same tier. It's kind of hard to split the hairs beyond that point. But so we're going to have to talk at some point about Brian Thomas, right? And he had such a great year. He's in the first round conversation at receiver. Brian Thomas this year at about more than a half year, almost a full year older than Nabers, and Nabers drew, let me see, almost 10 more points in the team's target share percentage. It was 21.7 for Thomas this year and 31.1 for Nabers. So Nabers only turned 20 right before the season started. He's like a late summer birthday. So he's younger than Thomas and still drawing so many more targets per snap than Thomas. And we again have reason to believe Thomas is quite good himself because Thomas's numbers were blistering on the other side too. So as the reasons continue to build to think Thomas is good, it all necessarily applies to Nabers too, in my opinion, especially given that he's younger. And that doesn't that's just a general rule. Extreme weird things do happen. Like Sammy Watkins was younger than DeAndre Hopkins and a lot more productive at Clemson than DeAndre Hopkins. Hopkins, obviously, the much better NFL receiver. So
Jason Jefferson.
I'm sorry, what's that?
Jason Jefferson.
Oh yeah, luckily both of those guys turned out to be the right answer. But yes, sometimes a player will outproduce or otherwise keep up with the production of another really, really good NFL player on their own team. And the first guy still might not be very good, but it's rare. And it's the age adjustment is what's particularly good at catching that. Like for Nabers at that age to produce the way he has and not be a clear all pro receiver it's specifically to say like his floor is probably Sammy Watkins. And Watkins had plenty of, anecdotal things screwing up his career. So I think that Nabers would have to test really poorly for me to lower him, to take him out of the first 10 picks of the draft. And I know he might get pinched out just because quarterback trade ups, stuff, late risers can cause weird things to happen. But Nabers, pending the workout metrics, is really, he's in a unique category. And for me, he's in the same tier as Harrison.
You think that would be a smart play for Chicago potentially if they take Caleb Williams with the first pick, grab a receiver with their second one at 9?
Yeah, I think the way it's shaping up, anybody that can get Nabers should try to get him, and that would certainly apply to the Bears. Nabers, as far as a comparison, I think he's going to be like 210, maybe like 215 at 6'2". I know he's listed as 6'3" or something. He looks like a sturdy 6'2" to me, and
wait, is this
again,
Nabers or Thomas?
Nabers.
Is
that just way off? I thought he was listed at like 6'3", 205, but he looks pretty sturdy to me.
Okay.
Anyway, Malik Nabers' application on the field to me looks pretty varied. I think he probably has more of a downfield game than Harrison, but I don't think it's at the expense of his underneath. No one is as, in my opinion anyway, no one is as technically proficient as Harrison running routes. Like you can see sometimes when Nabers is getting open in his routes, it's kind of, he's just like out freaking the guy covering him. Whereas with Harrison, it's like, you feel like you're watching, like some kind of like Japanese sword master or something. The way that he just kind of sort of stoically just does every single thing technically correct over and over and over. But Nabers, he seems like a little more wild. He seems to me like he's got a little bit more burst and speed and stuff, and he looks really good after the catch. Like he tracks well, he shows good ball skills downfield as a big play threat, but he also seems like the type who can do a lot of damage after the catch. Like I don't know, not making a direct comparison, but if you're genre wise, like AJ Brown after the catch, like you see Nabers do some plays like that, but he's also, he thrives downfield. It's not like he needs the yards after the catch.
Yeah, he's an impressive guy. I want to get more eyes on him in the lead up to the combine because, for a team as generally fun to watch as LSU was this year, I was no longer the college football editor. I didn't have to watch a zillion hours of college football every Saturday. And LSU, they lose that first game. They're out of the national championship picture. I didn't watch a ton of LSU this year, so I need to revisit.
I overstated Nabers' height. He's listed at 6 foot. I think he'll check in at 6 foot. He's listed at 6 foot 200. I think he might play at like 6 foot 210 in the NFL, like I don't know, like Chris Godwin kind of build, but more. I think there might be more athleticism there.
Yeah, supercharged Chris Godwin sounds pretty interesting to me. Let's talk Rome. Rome Odunze, big guy out of University of Washington. Great numbers all throughout his career. Really, really, of course, took off this past year. However, and as the Huskies almost found their way into a national championship, made it to the game, but lost to JJ McCarthy's Michigan, of course. But when it comes to Odunze, what are you seeing here?
Yeah, so we're talking about him third, but I wouldn't really argue against anyone ranking him first out of this group. There's a lot of similarities, and particularly between Odunze and Harrison, there's a lot of similarities. Like the theory of receiver that they present to the NFL is pretty much identical, and I really don't know how you're going to distinguish the two, barring athletic testing that diverges between them. The frame, the way that they play too, I was mentioning how Harrison can kind of sort of like Michael Pittman, but more athletic, like grind underneath over and over all game. And you're just wondering, like, how does this guy keep getting open for like 6-yard digs? Like, aren't they trying to cover that? And the reason he's able to chop away like that is because the defense is scared of him and has to grant a certain amount of respect. And it's like, even though the respect that they give is more towards stopping the big play, this big receiver is plenty capable of grinding away underneath. If they're going to give him a cushion, he can grind away at it. He doesn't need to get downfield to become a viable target. So again, that's a Drake London kind of thing to me. It's like this huge receiver who for some reason is just landing jabs left and right on the defense as if the defense doesn't know, like, try to keep that guy from catching an 8-yard curl every play. And it's all just, harder than it looks. And Odunze playing the way that he has, producing the way that he has, both this year and last year, he negotiates a level of respect where the defense just has to approach him that way. And we reach this equilibrium where turns out the best defenses can do against Washington is concede to Odunze a 69.7% catch rate at 12.4 yards per target. So those are enormous numbers. His target share percentage was quite a bit lower than Harrison and especially Nabers, but I think you can chalk that up to the not as if LSU or Ohio State lack any receiver depth exactly, but Washington had a bit more. They had McMillan who actually was I think might be a little underrated. Polk, the Texas Tech transfer. And they ran a more, like, I would say, committed spread kind of approach. And so Odunze only had 23% target share. But even if whatever explanations I have in mind don't apply, you could also chalk that up to just a poor coaching decision by Washington. Like, Odunze should have gotten more than 23% of the targets because he was clearing their team baseline by 4 catch percentage points in almost 3.5 yards per target. So right. Basically, they should have just thrown it more at him to see if the returns would diminish at all, because there's those numbers, those peripherals imply that he could have taken a lot more targets and his efficiency would have held up just fine. So again, you're talking like a workhorse, 100+ catch kind of receiver in the NFL, and I don't know what other than athletic metrics could really help me see any of these guys differently.
Yeah, it's a rock star trio up at the top. I don't think any of these guys fall past maybe like the 11th pick, something like that, barring that athletic testing. And yes, a quick programming note to that effect. We will be recording our pre-combine episode on the Wednesday before things get kicked off in Indianapolis. So that'll be on the 28th, and the combine starts on Leap Day, 29th. So we'll get you all ready for that one as well. Any other receivers that just real quickly enter that first round conversation? I think that these three are going to be like the high end ones, at least in most people's pre-combine rankings. Anyone that you've got your eye on a little bit later on as a first round possibility?
Yeah, it's a long group of names, actually. One name that I can cross off now that I had only really known him previously as a highlights guy, and I knew that he had slightly better production in 2022 at Michigan State than Jayden Reed, who has proven to be quite a good NFL receiver. Keon Coleman, I thought, was maybe in that late first round thing. He could be, I guess, still. He might test really freakish. He's still young. But his production at Florida State was a lot rougher than I realized. And that otherwise impressive sophomore year at Michigan State doesn't land with the same emphasis in light of that. So he's kind of an ambiguous prospect to me at this point. And in this class, you don't really want to be an ambiguous receiver prospect because there's a lot of unambiguously really good ones. Brian Thomas could end up being one of those guys. I thought he looked a little lanky, like a little bit of a long strider, but if he tests a certain way, I mean, his production was exceptional this year too. And even though his target share lagged behind Nabers by quite a bit, Thomas's efficiency was better at receiver. He had a 76.5% catch rate at 13.2 yards per target this year with 17 touchdowns or something. So that's all crazy stuff. And if he has wheels, then I don't know. I personally have a hard time fading a player like that, even if you're talking upwards of the first round. Like clearly he could have taken more targets. He had efficiency to spare. But Ladd McConkey, I feel confident saying is going to be like a top 35, 40 pick, maybe first round. Troy Franklin, I think, from Oregon could go ahead of McConkey, the one from Georgia, but I think Franklin has a little bit more testing sensitivity. Like he's got to run, in my opinion, like unambiguously fast, or else his game translation might not be quite as obvious. But Franklin's numbers at Oregon were excellent this year, especially. I mean, only a 22.4% target share, but he had 12 yards a target in an offense that averaged 9.4 yards per pass. And obviously he's at the very least, he's shown that he can play like an outside and vertical game. So if he shows he has the speed to continue threatening outside and downfield, I'll be able to see Franklin as a first rounder. But I think McConkey in a way has like the highest floor. I don't think, in part because I think we have really good reason to believe he'll run in the low 4.4s at worst. I don't really see a scenario where McConkey fluctuates much. Like he might go as high as 20 or something, but I think he'll go like 25 to 32 or something like that.
What a world. People were laughing at Georgia when they took Ladd McConkey in that class. They're like, is it Ladd McConkey?
It is quite a name.
Really?
It does sound like some kind of like, I don't know, Elmer Fudd's like younger regional nemesis or something.
Yeah, and then he is just absolutely cooking everybody during his time in college. Like, God, what a badass. And then speaking of Georgia receivers, Troy Franklin kind of reminds me of like West Coast AJ Green. Maybe not as iconic as AJ Green was coming out of college, but
I was thinking he might be like George Pickens. I say that because Pickens was a little shorter than AJ Green and didn't offset that with great speed. He only ran like a 4.47, even though he was kind of skinny. Franklin looks kind of skinny.
He does.
I would like him to run. I would like him to either show up heavier or run faster than Pickens did. But you know, the production with Franklin at Oregon is good enough that I think you can reason, like, even if he doesn't have Pickens's freak variable, you know, it's like Franklin has a sum of traits that can offset whatever level he might be, you know, quote unquote, too skinny. I don't think he's going to be like a high catch volume guy. I think he's more of a 80 catch, you know, 1,200 yard kind of receiver than like a 100 catch one.
Like T Higgins?
Yeah, no? maybe like a smaller T Higgins. Probably not quite as good as T Higgins, but I like him. Higgins was. I was definitely too low on him out of Clemson. He had that kind of production where it should have been like, you know, don't overthink this guy. And Franklin's pretty close. I would like him, given that he is skinny, I would like him to prove that he is also fast.
And we'll know for sure in just a couple of weeks. But that's going to do it for us. Airplane flies awfully low over top of me here. That's going to do it for us here on the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. We'll keep things rocking with draft coverage all throughout the rest of the offseason, or at least these next couple of months. Specifically, of course, what we'll touch on a lot of free agency stuff as that comes up. But these next couple of weeks, it's combine, it's draft, all that good stuff. So check back next week for more. But for Mario Puig, I'm John McKechnie. Thanks for listening. And again, if you want to get behind our paywall, check out a free trial. Go to rotowire.com/Jim. I think that's in honor of one Jim Coventry. Catch you next week, y'all.